The last time I laughed, I mean, really laughed, I was holding a burnt grilled cheese in one hand and watching my wife roll her eyes like she always did when I ruined lunch. It was a small moment. Insignificant, really, but it plays on a loop in my head now, because I didn't know it would be the last time I'd feel light in our house. My name's Clayton, not Clay. Never Clay. I don't know why, but shortening it always felt too familiar. I'm 39, I fix antique clocks, and for the last 12 years, I was married to someone who turned out to be better at pretending than I ever gave her credit for. Her name is Mallory. And no, this isn't one of those she was a monster all along stories. The truth's quieter than that. It's slow, like dripping water. A silence that grows teeth. We lived in a small craftsman-style home in Nebraska. Real fireplaces, crooked floorboards. Mallory taught English at the high school, just a mile down the road. The kind of teacher students actually remembered. Charming, sarcastic, animated. Everyone loved her. I did too. Or I thought I did. Maybe I still do. I don't even know anymore. Things didn't fall apart all at once. They never do they? It started with the dinners. Not the fancy kind. I mean Tuesday night chili, lazy spaghetti, grilled salmon when she was feeling ambitious. Dinners were our thing. She'd pour wine. I'd tell her about the customers I'd had that day. The old man who cried when I fixed a cuckoo clock from 1932. The teenager who couldn't believe clocks needed winding. But then came the silences. I'd be talking and realize she hadn't blinked in minutes. Her mind was somewhere else. I'd ask what she was thinking. She'd smile. Just tired, babe. That was her phrase. Always just tired, babe. I believed her. Then came Ronan. He was the new counselor at her school. Transferred from Chicago, according to her. Wrote poetry on the side. Wore leather bracelets. Had one of those, I understand your pain voices. She brought him up like it was casual. Ronan said this. Ronan played that song. Ronan recommended this book. The man's name lived in our house more than I did. Still, I played it cool. Or at least, I thought I did. Until the dinner. Mallory invited him. Said it would be fun to host. I made lemon chicken. She lit candles. I didn't recognize her laugh that night. It was too loud, too fast, like she was trying to show him something. And when I challenged him, when I calmly, politely, questioned a story he told about escaping the city because people there were soulless, she snapped at me. In front of everyone, my sister, my friend Ben, and two of her co-workers, she cut me down. Clayton, just stop. You always do this, trying to look smarter than people. I wasn't. I swear I wasn't. But the room froze. I felt it in my teeth. That's when I stopped. I didn't argue. Didn't yell. I just smiled and excused myself from the table. Mallory didn't follow me. Instead, I sat in the garage with the light off, holding an old pocket watch from 1911 that never worked quite right. I remember opening the back panel and seeing the smallest fracture in the balance wheel. Almost invisible, but fatal to the mechanism. That was us, I think. A break I hadn't seen before. One I couldn't fix. And I hadn't even found the worst part yet. The next morning, Mallory acted like the night before never happened. She stood at the stove flipping pancakes, wearing that faded college hoodie I used to love. You want blueberries or chocolate chips? She asked like we were still living in a Sunday morning rom-com. I stared at her back, the same curve between her shoulder blades I used to kiss when we were young and stupid in love. And yet, all I could feel was silence. Not the comforting kind. Not the stillness of peace. No, this was the kind of silence that screamed under your skin. The kind that made your hands shake while doing the most ordinary things. I sat at the table. Do you remember what you said to me last night? I asked. She glanced over her shoulder. What do you mean? You told me to stop. That I always try to be smarter than people. She rolled her eyes, flipping a pancake like she was brushing off a joke. Clayton, it was just a comment. Ronan was being nice, and you got weird. It was awkward. Weird. Awkward. That's all it was to her. I said nothing more. What was the point? For the next week, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. I convinced myself of a lot of things. That couples have fights. That maybe I was too sensitive. That Ronan was just her friend. And maybe, just maybe, I had sounded smug. It's the kind of gaslighting you don't need anyone else to do. You can do it to yourself just fine when you're in love with someone who's not in love with you anymore. But it didn't stop there. One afternoon I came home early. An elderly customer had canceled, and I thought maybe I'd surprise her. I parked down the block. I don't know why. Maybe part of me didn't want her to know I was home yet. Maybe part of me wanted to test something. Her car was in the driveway. The curtains in the living room were closed, strange for a sunny day. I came in quietly. The house smelled like wine and jasmine. I heard music. Something soft. Bon Iver, I think. And then her laugh. It was muffled, coming from the hallway, no shouting, no chaos. Just two people sharing a moment they didn't want the world to hear. I walked to her bedroom door. It was locked. She never locked that door. Not once. Even when we argued. Even when we had guests. Never. I stood there, listening. My breath shallow. My hands suddenly cold. Then, just as I was about to knock, silence. The music paused. A chair scraped across the floor. I stepped back, heart in my throat. A few seconds later, the door opened. Mallory stood there, cheeks flushed, hair a little messy, her shirt on backwards. Clayton? I got off early, I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. Oh, she said, eyes wide. I was just napping. I looked over her shoulder. There were 2 glasses of wine on the nightstand. She noticed, too. I poured one for later. But drank from both? She smiled tight, forced. Habit. I didn't say a word. Because at that point, I already knew. After that moment in the hallway, with her shirt inside out, cheeks red, and that lie about wine later, something inside me folded in on itself. It didn't explode. There wasn't rage. No confrontation. No name calling. Just this terrible, sharp quiet that settled into my bones and stayed there. I stopped asking her things. I stopped coming home early. And when I did get home, I made more noise on purpose. Shut the door louder. Let my keys jingle. I needed her to know I was there, not to catch her. Just to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. She acted like everything was fine. The next Friday, she left her phone in the kitchen when she went upstairs to take a bath. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. I hate that kind of thing. But my hands moved before my conscience could stop them. I wasn't even looking for proof of cheating, not really. I told myself I just wanted reassurance. One harmless check to stop my imagination from driving me insane. Just one. I opened her texts. Ronan's thread was pinned at the top. And the moment I tapped it, I wished I hadn't. It wasn't graphic. They weren't exchanging nudes or making plans to run away. It was worse. More intimate. Soft, careful messages that didn't belong in a marriage. You still make me feel seen. Even when I don't want to be. I keep thinking about last Thursday. I love how quiet you were after. I wish you didn't have to go back to that house. I stood there, my thumb hovering over the screen, watching the world I'd built turn to dust in my own kitchen. Mallory came back down in a towel while I was still reading. She froze. Her eyes dropped to her phone in my hand. And for a second, she looked like someone else. Not ashamed. Not terrified. Just annoyed. You went through my phone? She asked, like I had forgotten to lock the front door. I did. I replied. What were you looking for? You. She wrapped the towel tighter. You could have just asked. I did. I said. You lied. There was a long pause. The kind that stretches like taut rope. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked at me and said, and I will never forget this, you always make things worse when you dig. You know that. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the little things I had missed. The way she wore perfume to work again. The way she'd change her shirt before coming home if she'd been with him. The new laugh, that bright, sharp one, that wasn't mine anymore. And the next morning, she made pancakes again. Like we were back to normal. I started noticing patterns. She always saw Ronan on Thursdays. Always left early and came home late. Always said she was helping with a mentorship program. So I started doing something I never thought I would. I started watching quietly. I tracked her drives. Not with apps. I couldn't bring myself to stoop that far. But I knew the mileage on her car. I saw the gas receipts. I paid attention to how long her showers were after work meetings. And slowly, piece by piece, I put together the truth without her ever saying it out loud. The betrayal wasn't just the physical. It was how easy it was for her to lie. How natural. Like I was the side character in her main story. And the scariest part was, maybe I had been for a long time. But I wasn't ready to leave yet. Not until the dinner party. Not until she defended him. Not until she embarrassed me in front of everyone we knew. And that moment was coming fast. She planned it. That's the part that gets me. She didn't just invite a few friends over for food and drinks. She planned the whole thing like it was an event that mattered to her. Matching napkins. Candles that weren't just lit. They were arranged. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in over a year. And when I told her she looked beautiful, she smiled. But it wasn't for me. It was for Ronan. I knew it before he even walked in. I'd never met him in person before. Just the man from the texts. The ghost in our marriage. And when he finally appeared in our doorway, he wasn't what I expected. He wasn't the smug, overconfident guy I had imagined. He was soft-spoken, polite, charming in a humble kind of way. The kind of man who looks you in the eye when he shakes your hand. The kind of man who gets away with everything because he doesn't look like he would. Mallory introduced him with a weird kind of excitement, like she was proud to show him off. "Clayton, this is Ronan," she said, as if I didn't already know the man better than I should. I smiled. I didn't grip his hand too hard. I didn't glare. I just nodded and said, "I've heard a lot." He smiled back. "All good, I hope." Something like that. Dinner started off fake and pleasant. Her coworkers were there, a couple I'd met once before. My sister, Paula, came too, which surprised me. She never liked Mallory much, but said she wanted to support us. I think she knew more than I did. The wine flowed. The conversation buzzed. And then Ronan started talking. It wasn't just the sound of his voice, it was what he said. His stories were carefully curated to paint himself as this misunderstood, poetic soul. At first, I held my tongue. I didn't want to cause a scene. But then he made a comment about married life being too safe. He laughed when he said it, sipping his wine like it was harmless. "Sometimes," he said, "we spend so long building fences, we forget we're not supposed to live in cages." Everyone chuckled, except me. I looked at him and said, "Or maybe fences exist to keep people from wandering where they don't belong." The table went quiet. For a second, I felt it. That slow burn tension that crawls across skin. My sister looked at me. Mallory didn't. Instead, she laughed. Loud. Sharper than it needed to be. "Oh my God, Clayton," she said. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "That thing where you try to sound wise or deep, just to shut people down. It's condescending." I stared at her. At my wife. The woman who used to finish my sentences, who used to text me grocery lists and heart emojis, now defending him like I was the problem. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching me. And I realized I wasn't the husband tonight. I was the outsider. I stood up. I wasn't angry. I didn't slam anything or yell. I just placed my napkin on the table and said, "I need some air." Mallory didn't stop me. Neither did Ronan. That's when it really sunk in. This was already over, and I'd just been the last one to realize it. I walked to the edge of the backyard, lit only by string lights and cheap lanterns, and sat on the cold stone steps near the garden we never finished planting. For the first time in months, I cried. Quietly. No sobbing, no outbursts. Just hot, silent tears that came from somewhere deep I hadn't reached in years. Not because she cheated, not because she humiliated me, but because I had loved her completely, and I was finally starting to see she had stopped loving me long before Ronan ever showed up. I stayed outside longer than I meant to. The air had that late autumn bite to it, not quite cold, but sharp enough to remind you winter wasn't far. I could still hear their laughter through the sliding glass door, muffled but full of energy. I don't know what they were laughing about. I didn't want to know. Eventually, I went back inside, mostly because I felt like if I didn't, I'd be admitting something had broken. And I wasn't ready to let go, not yet. Not without a fight. Not without proof. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Ronan left first. He shook my hand again on the way out. I forced myself to hold it, even as my fingers itched to curl into a fist. "You've got a nice place," he said. I gave him the flattest smile I could manage. Yeah, I used to think so, too. Mallory didn't look at me when she said goodbye to him. She stood behind him on the porch and touched his arm like it was a reflex. My sister saw it. Her jaw tensed, and she didn't say anything, not yet. But I knew we'd talk later. After everyone left, Mallory started cleaning. That was her way of avoiding conversations. She did it every time we fought. She'd scrub something that didn't need scrubbing, rearrange perfectly stacked dishes, polish silverware we hadn't used since our wedding. I watched her for a while, then said softly, "Why am?" She didn't look up. "Don't. You said I make things worse when I dig. So let's not dig. Let's just call it what it is." She kept wiping the same plate, over and over. "I didn't plan this, Clayton. But you didn't stop it, either." She finally turned. "You stopped us a long time ago. You don't see me anymore." I wanted to scream. Of course I saw her. I had memorized her. I remembered how she used to hum when watering the plants, how she never used her car's rearview camera because she said it made her lazy. I remembered her chipped front tooth from childhood, the way she used to hide her smile, because of it until I told her it was the reason I fell in love. But I didn't say any of that. Because in that moment, I realized something sickening. It wouldn't have mattered. She had already replaced me, not just with another man, but with another version of herself, one I didn't recognize anymore. Later that night, while she slept, I opened her laptop. I know how that sounds. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to catch her. I was trying to understand, trying to figure out how long I'd been blind. Her emails were worse than her texts. There were calendar invites for fake evening workshops, hotel confirmations, and even one thread where she was forwarding Ronan links to couples retreats. She hadn't just stepped outside the marriage. She had built a whole second world with someone else while I was still in this one, waiting. The next morning, I called in sick. I didn't have a plan. I just needed space. So I drove. Not anywhere specific, just out of town, to the fields north of Bellevue. I parked under an old rusted water tower and just sat. I watched a hawk circle overhead. I counted how many minutes passed before I could take a full breath again. 12. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. From my sister, Paula. I don't know if I should say anything, but the way she looked at him last night, you don't deserve that. You really don't. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Thanks. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. Her response came quick. When you're ready, I'll help you pack. Don't let her turn this into your fault. That last line hit me hard, because somewhere deep down, that's exactly what I was doing. I didn't go home that night. After hours of sitting in that empty field under a sky that couldn't care less about me or my broken marriage, I ended up at a cheap roadside in 30 miles outside town. I paid in cash. The room smelled like bleach and loneliness. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the popcorn ceiling until my eyes burned. At around 4 in the morning, I wrote down 2 lists in my notebook. The first was called, All the Reasons I Stayed. The second, All the Things I Let Slide. The first list was shorter than it should have been. And the second? It filled 2 pages. When the sun came up, I drove back into town. Not to our house, no. I drove to the school. I parked across the street from where Mallory worked. I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't going to confront her in public. I didn't want a scene. But I had this deep, gnawing need to see her, to watch how she carried herself in the world when I wasn't supposed to be looking. Around 8:04 a.m., she walked out of the parking lot with her iced coffee and a canvas bag over her shoulder. She looked radiant, effortlessly confident, and I realized she had already grieved me. She had already moved on. Her grief, if there ever was any, must have happened months ago, when I still believed she was mine. Then Ronan pulled up, in a beat-up green Subaru. He parked like he belonged there, and the moment she saw him, her posture changed. She lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She reached out and touched his hand. Right there, in the parking lot, in daylight. And Ronan? He kissed her cheek. Casual. Like it was normal. They walked inside together. That's when it clicked. I wasn't just the betrayed husband. I was the inconvenience. The man she had to ease out of the picture gently. The backup plan. The financial safety net. When I got back to the house. Yes, my house. I found her in the kitchen again. Always the kitchen. As if pretending to make meals could make everything else invisible. Where were you? She asked, pouring coffee like nothing was burning. I needed time to think, I replied. She studied me for a second. Are you okay? No. That was the first honest answer I'd given her in months. I saw you, I said. At school. With him. She blinked, a long, slow blink, like she needed to reset her face. I didn't realize you were the spying type. I didn't used to be. She nodded. So what now? That question. So simple. So cold. That's when I told her, I'm not staying. But I'm not running away, either. I just need a few days to pack. After that, this house is yours, for now. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I left before she could twist it. Before she could start spinning guilt into threads she could pull on for the next 6 months. Before she could say, but we can fix it. Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Paula's ex-husband, Frank. Family law, 20 years in the business, owed me a favor. I told him everything. I was calm, factual, careful with my words. And he looked at me and said, she's either preparing to leave you with nothing, or she thinks you're too soft to stop her. I nodded. She's half right. That night, I returned home and slept in the guest room. Mallory didn't knock. Didn't ask questions. She didn't even say goodnight. Which only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about who was going to end it first, and I wanted to make sure that when it happened, I'd be ready. 3 days passed. I said almost nothing to Mallory during that time. I moved around the house like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I packed up my workshop slowly, one box at a time. I sold the antique grandfather clock I'd been restoring for months. It was supposed to be our anniversary gift. She never asked where it went. She didn't ask much of anything anymore. Her silences used to scare me. Now they bored me. On the third night, I caught her whispering on the phone around midnight. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. The way her voice dropped, the way she said, "Don't worry, it's almost done," that was enough. That night, I pulled out the second notebook. I'd kept it hidden under a floorboard in my workspace, just behind the old cabinets. I started it the week after I read her messages with Ronan. Inside were dates, quotes, screenshots printed from her laptop, even gas receipts I'd copied from her glove box. I documented it all, not to destroy her, but to protect myself. The next morning, I left the notebook on the kitchen counter beside her untouched coffee mug. No explanation. No note. Just the truth in ink and paper. She found it around 7:30 a.m., judging by the sound of her startled footsteps and the slam of a drawer she must have yanked open afterward. Then came the door creaking open behind me. "You've been keeping a record?" she asked. I turned slowly from the living room window. "You were building a future with someone else while I was still paying the mortgage. What did you expect me to do, Mallory?" She crossed her arms. "You really think you're the victim here?" "No," I said. "I think I'm the one who stayed too long." That hit her harder than I expected. For a moment, the confidence cracked. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her arms loosened. And just like that, I saw the truth. She wasn't ready for me to walk away. She wanted to drive me away, so she could say, "I tried." He gave up. But I wasn't giving her that narrative. I made sure to speak first. I talked to Frank, my lawyer. "The house stays in both our names until we settle. I'll move out. But if you try to sell anything, move money, or hide assets, I will file for fraud." "You're serious," she said, voice low. "Dead serious." Then I added, "You can have him. I hope he's worth what you're losing." And before she could respond, I walked out. No dramatic music. No slow turn to see if she'd cry. I didn't want tears. I wanted peace. I stayed at Paula's for a few nights after that. She gave me the spare room, fed me soup I didn't ask for, and let me sit in silence without asking questions. Until one night, when I came downstairs for water, she finally said it. "She's going to try to spin this." I nodded. "I know. She's going to say you were distant, cold, not emotionally available. That you didn't make her feel loved." "I know." She looked at me hard. "So what are you going to do about that?" And that's when I realized I didn't have to do anything, because the truth was already louder than her excuses. The next morning, I posted a letter. Not to her. Not to Ronan. To the school board. Inside were the dates of their overnight trips, screenshots of calendar invites, the names of students who had witnessed them holding hands off campus. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse. I simply presented facts and let the people in charge decide what it meant for their ethics policy. That same day, I filed the divorce papers. Clean. Direct. Uncontested. She didn't even fight it. A week later, I got an email from a parent at the school. "Just heard about Ronan and Mrs. Temple. Staff's buzzing. You're better off without her." Better off. I repeated those words for hours. Better off. Maybe that was true. But a part of me still mourned what I lost. Not the marriage. Not the home. But the version of me that used to believe her. The house sold faster than I expected. She kept most of the furniture. I didn't care. I took the clock. Not the one I'd restored. I sold that. No, I took the broken one. The one with the cracked brass casing and frozen hour hand stuck at 6:41. I didn't fix it. Not on purpose. It reminded me of the moment I finally stopped trying to rewind everything. I moved into a small apartment above a used bookstore 2 towns over. The owner's an old man named Marvin who insists on calling everyone kid. He gave me a deal on rent after I fixed the ancient wall clock in his shop, the one that hadn't chimed since Reagan was in office. I opened a small side business repairing vintage timepieces. Just me, my tools, and the satisfaction of bringing something forgotten back to life. The work is quiet, exact, and honest. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't pretend to be more than what it is. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. From Mallory. It wasn't dramatic. No confessions. Just a plain, 3-paragraph note that said, "You were right to walk away. I didn't realize how much you carried until you weren't carrying it anymore. I'm sorry for everything I turned you into just so I could feel justified in what I was doing. I hope you find someone who sees you the way I didn't." She signed it with just her first initial. I didn't write back, not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. Her apology didn't fix anything, but it let me exhale something I didn't know I'd been holding in. One day, a woman came into the shop, tall, red curls, hands stained with ink. Said she was a calligrapher. She brought an old mantel clock that had belonged to her grandfather and asked if I could bring it back to life. I told her I'd try. She came back a week later, then again the next. Then we started having coffee next door while waiting for gears to arrive. Her name's Eloise. She never asked about my past. She just asked what kind of tea I liked and if I believed in starting over. I told her I didn't know yet, but I was willing to find out. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that felt like enough. Some people wait for justice. Others chase closure. But me? I just needed the silence to stop feeling so heavy. Now, every morning, I wake up to the sound of clocks ticking around me, steady, imperfect, and real. And for once, I don't try to fix what isn't broken. I just let time move forward. And I move with it.